for joining us for another journey beyond 2000. All that later. But first, the most exciting and expensive motorbike on the road.
Honda's Tochigi Test Track, a proving ground for some of the world's most influential motoring designs. And today is special. Taking the track is one of Honda's most spectacular and unusual machines, with a mystique all of its own. The NR750, said to be the most sophisticated motorbike ever produced for the commercial market. With only 1,000 machines on offer and a price tag of $80,000 each, it's also one of the most exclusive and definitely the most expensive. This is not just some beautiful machine. The Honda NR750 is the product of 14 years of research and development. More money was spent on creating the perfect engineering design with this bike than on any other bike in Honda's history. Why? Because Honda have taken up an extraordinary challenge. The engine that makes this bike potentially the fastest thing on two wheels today represents an evolutionary stepping stone towards a new era in motoring technology. The giant leap that Honda took those 14 years ago was to change the elemental design of the internal combustion engine. Ever since the combustion engine was invented, this is what pistons have looked like. A connecting rod attached to a round piston head. Now, whatever sort of vehicle you're used to driving, whether it's got 4 cylinders or 12 cylinders, the pistons pushing it along are built to the same design. The piston's capacity to suck in the fuel mixture through the valves and expel the exhaust is the key to a 4-stroke engine's efficiency. And it's here that circular pistons have their limitations. A limitation that's existed for the last 100 years and confounded any attempt to solve it. Until now. In a really elegant piece of lateral thinking, the engineers here at Honda have replaced 2 circular pistons with a single oval piston. By doing away with the 2 cylinder walls in the centre here, they've reduced the surface area and the friction by a dramatic 25%. Now, if you look at this oval piston here, you can see it's got 2 spark plugs and 8 valves. The added gain of removing the 2 cylinder walls in the middle here is that it gives the valves, especially the 4 in the centre, much more room to operate in. That means they can allow in larger quantities of the air-fuel mixture, generating greater power. And they can also expel the exhaust gases much more efficiently. Effectively, it's a bit like being able to breathe through your mouth instead of through a stuffy nose. Because of the economical shape of the oval piston design, it's now technically feasible to install 4 cylinders where previously you could only put 2. Now, the implications of that for the future of the combustion engine are truly remarkable. As with many motoring developments, the racetrack was the test bed. The goal was to achieve the supposedly impossible, to produce a 4-stroke powered motorbike capable of beating the 2 strokes which dominated world racing. The trick would be to make the pistons move a lot faster and with greater efficiency, aims which they achieved. But still, the bike failed to place first. Honda believes that's due to the extra weight of the NR750 and the rider's inability to adjust to the differences in its handling. The industry judged it an expensive white elephant. But it's just possible that for the company, the bike was a red herring. The engine performance data and design information they gathered could see them ultimate winners, not on motorbikes, but in cars. With some 400 million cars worldwide running on 4-stroke engines, the impact of a smaller, lighter, more efficient engine that was also more powerful would be sensational. But back on the track, my mind was fixed firmly on 2 wheels. They call it a street machine, but to me, it feels like I'm strapped to the back of a rocket. Having said that, it's very, very forgiving to the casual rider like myself. It's a beautiful ride, very smooth, The four-stroke engine gives it a wonderful capacity to move through the gears with a minimum amount of fuss, even if you don't get the timing right. And unlike the two-strokes, where there tend to be power surges at certain points of acceleration, the NR750's electronically controlled four-stroke delivers the power evenly, up to top speeds of around 270 kilometres an hour. Something I left up to Honda's test rider to demonstrate. Ironically, it's this smooth application of power and the lack of the normal roar of a two-stroke that has disappointed some in the motorbike fraternity, who've labelled it a sterile experience. But I doubt any of the owners of the bike will be complaining. From the carbon-reinforced fairing, titanium engine parts, and special surface coatings to reduce friction even more, each part has been specifically designed to enhance performance. Honda, at peak production, will be hand-assembling only 3 a day. Yes, it's a bike with a limited production lifespan, but it would be a mistake to forget just what's important here: the engine and the oval pistons that put it in a class of its own.
Still to come, the smart highway. Linking your car by satellite to everything you want to know. But after the break, the biotelemetric egg. Good news for the white-naped crane.
Balloons have traditionally been associated with festive events. But the hundreds of millions of rubber balloons that we launch into the sky each year don't just disappear. Eventually, they return to Earth and take some time to biodegrade. This can cause environmental problems, particularly to marine life.
Balloons for sale. Half-price balloons for sale.
Growing environmental concerns in Japan led to deflating balloon sales, prompting a Japanese company to come up with a water-soluble version. So these balloons are made from polyvinyl alcohol instead of rubber and are coloured with harmless food additives. After about 10 seconds in contact with water, the balloons break up, posing no threat to the environment. So I guess these balloons are perfect for a day like this. But what happens if it rains?
Ever wondered how hot an Asian water monitor gets? How about this endangered native Asian cow, the gaur? When will it ovulate? How can you perfect the artificial hatching of rare and threatened birds? All these questions and more are finding answers at the New York Zoological Society's Bronx Zoo. The key turns out to be biotelemetry, measuring biological information at a distance, remotely keeping track of whatever parameters in the living animal are of interest. By fusing new technologies, though, a big telemetric opportunity is now opening. This fish meal conceals a mini temperature sensor that will report from the lizard's stomach. Similarly, the ovulation of this gaur will be plotted from the temperature sensor installed in her vagina.
The advances in telemetry with the increasing technology of video technology, computer technology, and new electronic sensors, and the fact that the telemetry is smaller, we're able to get new kinds of information that we weren't able to before in a more reliable way and also in a more complete way.
Meet Maxine. 20 years a New York resident, she's a 38-year-old Asian elephant, mother of none. Maxine's modelling this year's look in a leather and silicon chip studded collar supporting a satellite transmitter. Developing and fitting this instrumentation on the zoo model laid the groundwork for applying the technology to wildlife conservation.
Because we know nothing about their biology, we don't know how to conserve them, we don't know how to protect them. How big do you need to make a park to save African forest elephants? We need some basic biological information so that we can transpose that into conservation action to help save the species, an endangered species.
This is Cameroon, West Africa. Somewhere out there is Isabel, a wild, young 9-year-old female African forest elephant. She's wearing a collar just like this one. And with a bit of luck, without even leaving New York, we'll know if she's alive or dead and where exactly in the Cameroon she's wandered. Those NOAA weather satellites are in position, so we'll try and track that signal. How are we going?
9105. Okay, this is quite exciting. We have an elephant in Cameroon. This is back on the 4th, and we got sensor information twice, and we know the elephant's alive, so we can rest easy.
But most exciting is Telemetry's role in the race to save the endangered white-naped cranes of Asia. Worldwide damming of waterways for agriculture interferes with their breeding wetlands. Less than 10,000 remain, mostly in Japan, China and the former USSR. With only 300 birds in captivity, an international breeding program's underway. A pair mates for life, lays 2 eggs a year and raises 1 chick. But take the eggs away and the cranes keep laying replacements. Successfully incubate these eggs and instead of 1 chick a year, you could raise 6 to 8 from each pair. But successful incubation is not so easy. Only half were hatching, despite every care. What was needed was more information on what happens in the nest. While this is close enough in colour and size to fool the would-be parents, this egg is never going to hatch. The outside eggshell is epoxy resin, and you can see 7 temperature sensors. The holes in the nose are also to keep track of the humidity. But inside, it's quite fascinating. Now, if I turn it over, you can see those 3 mercury switches there. Now, they're configured in a triangle to keep track of the position. It keeps track of how the parents turn the egg over. But most of these internal workings are for processing all that information and sending it out in bursts of VHF digital data every 3 minutes. All that nest-based information is synchronised with video images of what's happening at the time. The radio telemetric egg did its job.
Much to my surprise, we found that the microclimate around the egg of a crane is not one temperature, it's a thermal gradient. From the top of the egg to the bottom of the egg, there's a 10 centigrade temperature difference. And in our artificial incubators, we do not in any way replicate that thermal gradient.
Should this prove biologically significant, it will mean a redesign for future incubators. Meanwhile, the Bronx Zoo entertains the public, publicises the endangered, and harnesses all that technology has to offer to better understand our wild world.
Coming up next, the Photo CD. New technology that will attempt to replace the old. And later, how learning more about plants makes it easier to paint the house.